everyone, thank you for watching my channel. My name is Michelle. I am the owner of MBM Simplicity and also Tumblers in the Making with my Facebook page. So let's get started. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so one of the things I want to go ahead and let you guys know is something new that I've learned. Now, you prep your cup as usual, you sand it down, you wash it with Dawn soap, and then you have the water spots or the cup is still wet and you have water all over the place. Now, I've used the absorbent sponge cloth, and this is what they use for vehicles, and it wipes the cup absolutely perfectly. It like literally leaves it completely dry. It doesn't leave any lint, any particles, so this is way more better than using just paper towels. And then once it dries, give it a few more minutes, then spray coat your tumbler with the base coat of white. Alright, so as for the inks and the colors that I've used, I used navy, violet, and white, and later on I'll be using the fuchsia and the ruby. And then I'm also going to be using the metallic paints, acrylic paints by Folk Art, and it's called brushed metal, and the acrylic paints are beautiful on this tumbler. Now keep in mind that you don't have to use acrylic paint, you can use the mica powders instead. But I wanted to try out the acrylic paints on this instead. An option that if you guys want to choose, then I would suggest that you guys have in hand while you're doing this a coffee stirrer stick, or you can have a wooden sharp tip, or you can use a popsicle stick, but not on the flatter side, more on the thinner side, the edges, in order to do a certain design that I did on this tumbler. And you'll see along the way what I mean by that. All right, so for this particular cup, I am actually adding about 15 mLs of epoxy, and I want to make it as thick as possible so that I have movement of the alcohol inks. You guys don't forget to go ahead and put some epoxy on the bottom of your cup as well. I tried not to put too much on the bottom of the cup because for me, too much epoxy will also not make it too smooth. I don't know, that's just me. But I try not to add too much epoxy on the bottom of the cup. So it's really up to you. If you want to make it thick, you can. I choose not to. Alright, so for the next step is your alcohol inks. Make sure that you shake your alcohol inks before you place it on the tumbler. It helps to thicken the inks once you go ahead and place it on top of your tumbler. Please don't forget to shake it, because I have done maybe 1 or 2 times where I didn't shake it and it came out very light. But you know, the cups came out fine after that anyways, so I'm okay with that. But as you place your inks onto the tumbler, you want to make sure that you spread them around. You don't have to. You can try and keep it all in one area. And as you can see here, I stopped the cup because I wanted it centered. I had an idea in my head, so I wanted to keep it centered, and I regret that now. I kind of wish I just spread it around, but the cup didn't come out bad at all, which is pretty ironic. It came out great. I love the way the cup came out. So it's really up to you. Here, I'm actually changing my mind. I was like, no, I kind of want it sporadically and not where it's in a straight line. So I don't know what I was thinking. I'm very even. I'm an even number person, so everything has to be even to me. So I was like, nope, just go ahead and spread it everywhere. As well as for the other colors, just spread them everywhere. So it's really up to you. You cannot go wrong in where you place your alcohol inks. All right, for the next one, I'll be using the Ruby alcohol ink, and I'll be pretty much sporadically spreading them on the white areas that I feel that it needs it the most. But at this point, I kind of feel like I don't want to add way too much ink on here either. And the reason why is because you are going to clash them colors together, and it's going to have its own combined colors. So you want to be careful with that. If you want to keep the colors that you have the way it is, then I would suggest that you use less alcohol ink, because remember, you're going to spread them. They are going to move once you use heat to this. All right, real quick, I want to let you guys also know that's important to keep in mind, is that if you add way too much alcohol ink into your tumbler, it's going to cause it to have separation, epoxy separation. The inks will be there, but it'll start kind of leaving holes, dips, or fisheyes into your tumbler. And this doesn't particularly means that you're going to have to start all over with a whole new cup. No, that's not the case. Just add epoxy over it once it dries, and then sand it down. Never sand your cup if it has just that layer of the ink with the epoxy. So never do that, or you'll be scratching off your inks that you work so hard for. All right, so right now I am trying to give it movement. So I'm kind of using my stir stick, and I'm trying my very best to keep it on the flat side of my stir stick, because if I use the wider angle of my stir stick, it's going to separate the colors and the epoxy further away instead of coming together and creating kind of like a fire effect. And I'll be doing more of this later on, but I use my stir stick quite often. I've tried different tiny pins and needles to see if it'll give me a sharper edge, but this came out great. I personally can't say I did anything wrong. There are some things I'll probably change, and that is waiting for the epoxy to thicken a little bit more. Again, if you use your stir stick or popsicle stick, use the very flat part of it. Don't use the width, because the width is going to cause you some problems to separate. And in my case, luckily it did combine together, but that's because I added more alcohol ink to it, and so it closed up and it kept it together. It's kind of hard to explain. It looks so pretty when I did that. I just kind of wish I didn't add way too much ink to it. All right, so I'm going to add some white alcohol ink into this, because I felt like the inks were drying out on me so quickly. So I started adding some white to spread some of that color, kind of like a pie. I want it to kind of grow in its own way. And at this point, I should have just kind of moved it around. Tip it up, tip it down. Eventually I did stop the turner for it to spread, and that works too. You should do that for sure. I've done a few other tumblers after this with alcohol ink, and it worked. So if you stop it, give it just a little bit of heat, it'll move it. So here I am again. I'm adding more inks to it, like it's not enough, this poor cup. But again, it came out great. I love the way this came out. It came out so pretty. I'm so proud of it. And then have you noticed where I placed the stir stick along the way, how it just gave it that cool effect, like the fire effect? It kind of looks like a flower if you think about it. And you can do that. You can make it into a flower if you want. Be creative with your stir stick. Give it that little extra edge. Not a lot of people can create that. Well, not that they can't create that. I haven't seen anybody do that. I've seen people use their stir stick to give it movement, but never have I seen it give it a fire effect or a flow effect, a tail, I guess you can say. All right, so right here, I felt that the colors were starting to clash. Just like I told you before, sometimes it can look good, sometimes it doesn't, but if you add way too much inks into your tumbler, it's going to clash. It's definitely going to give it its own color, something that you might not want. So I added white into those two colors that were mixed together. Now here, yet again, I'm using my stir stick. I just want this cute little effect on this tumbler, and it's working out. It really is. It's really starting to look really, really pretty. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and use the acrylic paint. I add like 2 drops inside the epoxy. I mix it really, really good. And then you want to make sure the consistency is very, not super wet, but not too dry either. The epoxy was still wet to the touch, very loose, and that's what I wanted. So I drip it onto here. Now, whatever you do when you add the acrylic paint into your epoxy, make sure you don't add too much acrylic paint, because then it'll come out to be a glob, and you don't want that on your cup. You actually want movement. Now, when I did this cup, I wanted to add some gold to it for sure. I felt that the colors were beautiful. I just needed that little pop of color, a little shine to it, since there's no glitter involved. So when I did this, I wanted to kind of recreate the marble effect like they do with the hydro dip, and that's what I was going for. So when I added the acrylic paint with the epoxy on here, I thought that was going to work out great. It gave it a different effect than the mica powder. Now, if you would have done mica powder, then the effect would stay where the gold is placed. It's going to stay there. Now, with the acrylic paint mixed with the epoxy, it actually pushes your colors away. It's kind of hard to explain. It's like leaving the gold in the middle, and then the epoxy melts off the gold of your acrylic and pushes just a kind of like a just epoxy around it and just pushes it away. All right, so we're going to go ahead and use heat. And one thing I want you to know, for those that don't, do not burn your epoxy. Now, when I first started my tumbler world, I burned epoxy for sure, and it leaves, how would I explain it? It's like it bubbles up, and not a very good bubble either. These are extremely bad bubbles, and you'll see smoke coming out of it, and that's not a good thing either. But I was starting, so I didn't know. I was testing things out. I wanted to see what would happen, and now I know. Fish eyes, it causes a lot of fish eyes as well if you burn your epoxy. Now, when you do actually try to get inks to move around, you want to stay away from your tumbler. Give it a little bit of warmth, and that's all it needs. You can stop your turner for it to give it some more extra movement. You can place it upside down, kind of give it that wave feel. You can do that too. Or you can use your blow dryer on a colder setting. If it has that cold button where you can cool it down or make it hot, you can do that as well. When I put some heat on here, on this cup, I put it towards anything that's circled, anything that's round. So I went ahead and kind of went straight into it, and then I pulled away with my heat gun. So with my heat gun, I went in and came right out, and you can see it spreading. And as you can tell, the epoxy with the acrylic is already starting to spread. The gold will spread with it, but then the epoxy separates even more and pushes the colors away. So you're going to see more of that effect in a little bit. It is starting to show now, but it's going to really have more white spots around the gold and start pushing the colors away, which is good too because it's beautiful. Now I'm using my torch, and this is what I prefer to pop my bubbles. Now when I'm doing the torch, all I do is a blast of heat. That's all I do. I do a blast of heat to pop any bubbles I see. At this point, I'm seeing I'm seeing some fish eyes, I'm seeing some separation of epoxy, which I told you before. It's fine. It's not gonna bother me. But the cup came out great. And I'm pretty sure your cup will be absolutely beautiful. Alright, so remember when I told you guys that the acrylic paint with the epoxy kind of pushes everything away? And that's what happened here. You can tell that it's flat, it's more white. You can see the cup, the base of the cup a little bit more. So that's what it does, it separates it. So I added a little extra more of acrylic paint with the epoxy mix in the center of where it spreaded, and this worked out a lot better. Now I kind of wish, thinking about it, is to wait until the epoxy itself was a little thicker, more dense, and then add the acrylic into it. Now we're going to go ahead and add a little bit more heat to it. Just a little bit, not too much, because now I know what happens when you flatten that gold with too much heat. Alright, so I'm going to use my coffee stir stick and start kind of giving it that wave that I was telling you about, kind of give it the tail look, fire effects, whatever you want to call it. And I'm kind of glad I did that. So I thought I was done with this cup, but I felt I didn't have much of a tail effect or a fire effect. So I went ahead and used my stir stick again, give it that letter S onto the tumbler, get the stick going on a darker color, and then move it around the cup in order to, I don't know, just give it that fire effect. I added a little bit of heat to combine the colors, kind of push it in together, so it creates that line, it creates that tail or fire effect. And I'm glad I did that because it made the cup look that much prettier. So I went ahead and gave it a little bit more of an S design to it and a little bit more heat, and left it on the turner for a little bit, and it still moved as it was in the turner spinning. And this is the result of that. Look how beautiful that came out. That's it for now. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and be up to date for more future videos.